Hello, and welcome to the Media Copilot. It's a podcast that explores how AI is changing media, journalism, and content creation. I'm Pete Paschal, longtime tech journalist and founder of the Media Copilot, and I'm excited to bring you fascinating conversations with fellow journalists, media executives, and the people building how the business of news will work in our AI future. This week, I'm thrilled to welcome Adam Mosam. Adam is the founder of Channel One, and if you follow AI at all, you've probably heard of Channel One. It's the news channel where all the anchors are AI avatars. The news they're reporting is real, but the reports are scripted, produced, and distributed by AI. After releasing a teaser video in late 2023 that went mega viral, Channel One is now ready to go to market, not to be the AI version of CNN, but to empower media companies with the technology of AI powered production. I find the idea of AI avatars reporting the news to be super fascinating. There are obvious advantages, the main one being cost. Producing good looking video news is really, really expensive. And Channel One can potentially put the dream of owning and operating a news channel into the hands of a lot more people. But there are also some pretty clear trade offs by going the AI route. The big issue is, do you lose trust if you use AI this way? And what happens to all that human content? Not to mention the human jobs in the long term. Adam and I talk about all of that and more. Be sure to stay tuned till the end where we get into some really next level stuff with how people might get their news in the future when we have personal news agents bringing us stories right to us wherever we are. It's exciting stuff. And if you enjoy the conversation as much as I do, I'd encourage you to share it with a friend or a colleague. And I'd be grateful if you'd consider subscribing to the Media Copilot newsletter if you haven't already. I'd also really appreciate it if you leave a rating or review in whatever podcast app you're in. Those really do help the show get in front of more people. Lastly, you can check out everything we offer, including AI training classes for media, marketing, and PR professionals at mediacopilot.ai. Okay, I'm done with all that housekeeping stuff. Let's jump into my conversation with Adam Mosam of Channel One right after a word from our sponsor. Do you ever feel like you're wasting time sifting through endless stock photos, trying to find the one that fits the vibe you're looking for? Well, Adobe's got you covered. With new AI features in Adobe Stock, creators and media pros just like you can now zero in on exactly what you're looking for. Thanks to Adobe Firefly, you can use the power of generative AI to customize stock images before you even click purchase. Here's how it works. Do you like the subject of an image but not the background? Just click to swap or remove it completely. Got an oddly specific aspect ratio? Expand images to fit perfectly, no cropping required. Want to stay on brand? Generate variations of your image that match your brand's style. All of this is as easy as typing in a prompt and letting AI work its magic. The result is stunning, unique, professional quality visuals in seconds. Oh, and here's the kicker. When AI generated content is inspired by Adobe Stock contributors, they get paid. It's a win win for creatives everywhere. So say goodbye to creative blockers and hello to a smarter workflow with Adobe Stock. Head to adobe.com to see it in action. Adam, thanks for dropping by the Media Copilot.
How you doing, Pete?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good.
Awesome. Well, I'm super thrilled to talk to you. I, like the rest of the media world, I was super captivated by Channel One and the whole idea of it. There was a teaser video, of course, that dropped towards the end of 2023, almost a year ago now. And it spelled out sort of exactly what you're doing, which is this AI based, I guess, we'll have to talk about the adjective and how you describe it in a few minutes, but an AI based news network complete with AI avatars reporting the news. I remember sharing that out on LinkedIn at the time. I got like insane engagement at the idea that you could create like a news network and have essentially all the on air material like AI produced. It's crazy, yet at the same time, it's so totally expected in a way. So I really kind of would love to know like the genesis of this, and really what you're trying to build here. Because on the surface, it looks like you're doing the AI version of CNN, and it sounds like that's a part of it, but it's sort of bigger than that. So tell me, how did you? What are you trying to achieve with Channel One, and how did it come to be?
Bigger than CNN, yeah.
Well, the idea bigger than CNN, like that could be a goal. Maybe it's on your
Yeah,
it's on your deck.
yeah. So, I'm startup guy. I have been for more than 20 years now, and this is company number 3. Um, while I was doing number 2, we sort of ended up in media. It wasn't really the plan, but that's where we wanted to go. So I've been in some way, shape, or form in media for about a dozen years.
And what was number two?
It was a VOD platform. So at that time, it was you could bring your own videos and you could charge for them, subscription based or transaction based, and in the very beginning, ad based. And the big idea on that one was that as these SVOD networks grow, one particular rights holder might not have enough content to power an entire service. So we had some intellectual property around people all working together. Everyone contributes what they have toward a channel. There's a full back office to power this whole thing, and then they can go to market together. And then we had a system that would determine how much you get paid and fair wage for your content you brought and all that kind of stuff. So we ended up having 10,000 SVOD channels on it, and
Oh
we
wow.
sold that company in 2018. The folks that I worked for after that, we did. I mean, there was a lot of M&A. We bought 7 or 8 companies while I was there. Part of that job was production, and we were making TV shows for Amazon and Netflix and Disney and so forth. And the more I learned about production, it was just one more thing that I kind of understood. The fly was their CTO, so we was on top of every system, whether it was the rights management or content ops, whatever it might be, distribution, we own streaming networks, things like that. And when AI was sort of having its breakthrough moment, you're looking about 2 years ago, of course, there's a lot of discussion around, well, what is this going to do? What is the impact there? Is it a fad? Is it useful? And all the other things people talk about when new tech comes out. And it became increasingly clear that we would be able to lower the production cost by about 100x. Not 100%, but like by 100x. And that's interesting, right? I think at some point, for me, when I start a company, if I'm going to work on something and you at this time in your career, what you're looking at 5 to 7 years, you want to work on something that you feel is a reasonably high level of inevitability on. So it seemed, and it still does, look this way, that there's this inevitable wave. That's sort of the next shift in content creation, is that you're going to be leveraging the power of this new technology in some way, shape, or form. And the question that ends up being, well, to what extent, right?
Right.
And I think for us, I mean, it was just me at the time. I wanted to see what worked. And the process, if you've done it before of running a startup, is just an endless stream of experiments. So I made some content that I thought was pretty good. Showed it to some people, and like, this is terrible.
What were you using at the time? I assume it's like
Oh, I don't even remember.
progenitors, stuff like Hedra and Runway and whatever else.
I don't know. None of that was
Yeah.
there. So
Yeah.
I made something, and I've got a good buddy of mine who's been in content for a very long time, Scott. And I said, what do you think? He's like, well, this is awful. You should never show this to anybody. I said, okay. So can you do better? I said, well, of course I can do better. I said, okay, well, let's do better. And that's where that showcase episode came from, is bringing aboard Scott and, of course, his extended team. And, what they were able to do, the mission there was, can we create something that would, pass the visual Turing test, right? Like, there's this uncanny valley. And if you think about it, I mean, I've been playing video games for the last, I don't know, 35 years or whatever it is. The graphics get progressively better, but never quite real. And
Right.
it's
It's always
right.
a gap.
It's these bitmaps to polygons to whatever. And this technology comes from a different direction with the generative technology, because you're not starting with these ever so complex models. You're just starting with something that's real. So, the idea was, let's make something. And this is to put your frame of reference in mind. 4-second videos, 8-second videos on Twitter. That was like the
Right.
height of AI, is these 8-second, and we did 16 seconds. We just put out a 22-minute episode. And everyone's like, I'm sorry, what is this? Um, and behind the scenes, we were just like, look, we want to do it because we want to almost plant the flag in the ground, but also we want to test what people actually like it. What we knew, there's going to be a reaction. Is it going to be strongly positive, strongly negative? I mean, who knows? Um, and we
Right. To be fair about the 2 seconds and the 22 minutes, it's like your stuff is obviously highly edited. And it's more than just sort of, do a prompt and suddenly you have a 22-minute thing. Um, so that's super interesting. Um, but yeah, like, so that 22 minute episode, when did you make that, by the way?
So that episode took I don't know, maybe 2.5 weeks to make.
Okay.
And it had news from that morning and the night before and stuff like that. But there was some pieces that were more evergreen that we could do earlier. But we put it out. We wanted to get enough eyeballs on it so we could tell if there was a reaction. We were nervous that 1,000 people might see it or not even, right? And we were sort of on the phone saying, "Hey, can you retweet this to some friends?" to try to get some,
Been there.
to try to get some juice on the thing. And we had, I don't know, it was like 300, 400 views after an hour. Like, oh, this is, we're not going to make our 1,000 or our stretch goal being 10,000. And then people started retweeting it, and we hit over 5 million in the first 24 hours. And then we got more of a reaction than we needed. But we're hoping.
Mm,
So, but yeah,
yeah.
it wasn't some grand announcement. It was really just us testing to see if we could make something that people would watch.
Yeah, and so like I'm glad you sort of led off with the obvious cost of sort of reducing it by 100x, which seems like the absolute sort of X factor here in terms of like like even if it isn't going to catch on, like I said, or like bigger than CNN or whatever, the fact that the cost is so low now and it's going down, um, is just like really the main thing. Because like having been worked in strategic roles in digital media companies, video is always a very expensive thing to get into. You not only have to hire producers and on-air talent and editors. Equipment tends to be expensive. You got to think about where's your studio, and you could lease that stuff, and all of this um, comes into play in making sort of that strategic decision of even trying to do it. And now it seems like the big part of that cost is mostly just drag and drop. Like I've just put that in the trash, and but again, as long as you sort of buy into this idea that, oh, AI generated stuff is part of this, can be part of this content plan. So I guess I'm really curious then, like getting into sort of your customers and sort of the business model of like, so is the goal again to create this network and kind of see what happens, but also, do you want to market your process to existing broadcasters or publishers that want to get into doing this sort of content at a low cost?
Well, I'll only clarify why the cost mattered. It wasn't reducing the cost for the sake of reducing the cost. It was reducing the cost to enable new applications. And if you look at the arc that entertainment content went through, starting from a subset of a broadcaster to a cable channel, and then you have the world of streaming, and in this case, just pick the obvious one, Netflix, where if you used to watch the History Channel and the Comedy Channel, and you went to Netflix, and now if you like history and comedy, it knows that, and it is going to surface that appropriate content to you amongst its universe of content. For news, at the time and still now, you have major, predominantly cable news networks that drive a lot of the discourse, and they make X amount of content in prime time, and the entire country gets the same thing. And the theory
Right.
was, okay, they're making, I don't know if it's 30 stories a night or whatever that is. The theory was if you could go make, say, 1,000, well, could I
Mhm.
then effectively personalize a news feed for somebody? It would still have to rely on, real journalism and quality reporting, but it could be everything from the local area that you're in. It could be the parts of the world that you care about, your favorite sports teams. It could be the stocks you own. It could be whatever category of lifestyle and genre content. But that's really what the point was. It wasn't like,
Mhm.
hey, here's this cool technology. We can bring costs down. That's really boring for startups. It was, can we make a new class of service and bring news into that same generation as entertainment? So that was the genesis point. Just
Got it.
to throw that on the cost comment. Um, so what now to answer your next question is, what are we doing with this? After that episode came out and we got more attention than we bargained for, there was, I think the number we quote was like 7,000 emails the 10 days after that came out. Yeah, it was the C-level executive of every media company on earth. It's just like, "Hey, what are you doing?" Um, so that obviously, I still haven't opened them all, if we're being honest. So if you've emailed us, please try again.
Did you open some of them?
Yeah, we opened something. Um, and, it just having these set of conversations about what we were doing, what we could do, what we want to do, all these different things. And we realized that there was a really great partnership, a set of partnerships we can put in place with some of these bigger media companies. So if the first thing we wanted to do was to prove that it was watchable, and that took 2.5 weeks for an episode, the second thing we had to do was achieve scale. And what that means is, have enough technology where we could automate the entire process. Like you're saying it
Right.
wasn't just a prompt; it was edited. Well, it's not anymore. Now,
Really?
well, yeah. I mean,
Mhm.
I've shared some material with you.
You did. You did, but I got the so it ranks all this stuff, and there's still a human driven process of dragging and things and reviewing it. But yes, 100%. So why don't we talk a little bit about that process?
Yeah.
In that, first of all, before we get into that, you're talking about assembling these stories from raw material, essentially. Like so, the thing I saw was there was a Reuters API that the CMS was using. So what is that's obviously one element. You can as Reuters, but like where do you get essentially the stuff that you're putting into this engine? Is it licensed, syndicated stuff?
Yeah, of course. So, from the perspective of working with partners, they have their own sources of content, whether it's a
Hmm.
wire service like a Reuters or it is editorial content. I mean, you can think about a lot of workflows that would be an article to video workflow for a publisher. There really ends up being two separate use cases for the technology. The first one is now sort of the product name we've put around this is called First Cut, where it takes a pile of assets and gets you to the first cut of that video. And that those assets really they could be anything, and there's usually levels of priority you're going to give to bundles of assets. And I mean, I can explain that a little bit. Is if you wanted to go from article to video, for example, then what you would basically do is you'd look at any assets that came through that article, and then it goes to the first process, which is really looking at what's available. It's obviously going to need more material than that to create a video, so you might look at the archives of that publisher, and then if you need to go deeper than that, you might go to licensed partners, think Getty or someone like that, and pull extra material. So you have to make sure you have enough to work with. From there, the first step is really around the script, and again, we'll do the first cut of that, and then of course a user can come in and adjust or change, and then after that, we have to create the video, and that's synthesizing everything from a voice or a performance. If there is an AI anchor, there may not be. It could be voice only, or it could be you leave a slot for a real anchor to come and fill. And then there's all of the editing and placing the B-roll and all of that kind of stuff. So there's a set of editing decisions that go into this. You want to present to a customer and say, "Hey, is this what you were looking for?" But it's really having that. I don't like the word copilot so much. It,
Interesting.
the word
I'll try not to take offense at that.
no, no,
Uh,
not in this scenario. But in what I mean by that from a product standpoint, if you look at Tesla's autopilot and Microsoft's Copilot, right? Then you basically have one saying we're going to do everything, and one saying
mhm,
we're here to help you, but there's a limit on our capability. I
mhm.
think over time you settle into a gray area in the middle where it's actually
Right.
quite a capable system, and it's not that it requires your help, it's more that it's politely offering your ability to help, right? You want
Mhm.
that human level of choice and curation and, right, the
Yeah. You want someone with experience with the real world as a human to create, oversee the content for you.
100%,
But
and
I get your point in that the more sophisticated the system, the more of that is pre-made for you. And even the more it learns either your preferences and habits as an individual or an organization, that number just inches ever closer to 100%.
yeah,
Even if not quite getting there.
exactly, and the philosophy on building these products now, it's similar to like a self-driving car. We just talked about autopilot, where if you can imagine, if you couldn't disengage from autopilot, you'd be driving into the wall a lot, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
So what we really want to do is get you to a point where you have a level of confidence, and then make some suggestions around what you should do to complete the process. But you always have the ability at every key point to step in there and then make your changes that you'd like to make.
Yeah, it's wild. It's like you seem to have jumped far ahead conceptually in what people were sort of imagining when ChatGPT first came out, right? Because everyone saw, oh, this can take jobs, this can cut stuff down. But then they rapidly sort of realized it's not really as sophisticated as it needs to be able to do those things. And then not only have you sort of thought about that, well, what if we introduce this level of sophistication, but also let's make it almost format agnostic and go all the way with let's go to the hardest thing you would need to do, which is like video, which is like create some visuals and pair that with a realistic looking person again, which was sort of challenging at the time. So you're really sort of like I say, almost like jumping to the end of this AI content game. And I guess my question would be kind of like, are we ready for it? We're barely reconciling the ethics and the economics of just doing this with text. And we're starting to sort of see some encroachments in the audio world, both with spoken articles and now things like Google Notebook LM. Um, and is the world ready for? And I don't know what a readiness looks like, and I'd like to hear your theory on it. For when we have AI avatars essentially giving us the news, how are you grappling with two things? I guess specifically, one, the ethics of that, and two, what is the audience relationship with that sort of news service? And I think that's a slightly more complicated question. So let's take that one second.
Sure. So I think in an attempt to answer, I'm going to just give you a little bit of nuance on how we think about the product or the service that we're creating. And we talk about this 5-year timeline or something. You have to put yourself a little bit into the future and say, okay, well, everyone's got their own idea of where AI ends up, right? It's a somewhat useful chatbot to the God model comes out and does everything for us. But from what we can see, there's a reasonable level of expectation. And we see AI can code, right? Relatively well. And you're starting to see now that AI will commandeer your computer and
Yeah,
and do it.
the
Right?
Claude stuff. Yeah.
People make humanoid robots because the world is designed for humans. So if you can perfect a humanoid robot, then the user interface is there for you. So in that respect, computers and all the software that exists today has been made for people to use, to point and click and type. So by allowing the AI to take over your computer, then it can use all the existing software. So if you can think about you've now achieved that level, you almost want to create a system that is designed for that universe. Okay.
Mhm.
So really what it looks like is if you have an unlimited amount of AI based labor, your job as a software designer is to do two things. Number one, focus on massive parallelization, right? I'm going to have me personally sitting in this chair. I'm going to have 100 AIs doing my job for me right now. So I need to have some kind of a command and control system where I can monitor what they're doing and give them instructions. And the second thing that you want to do is you want to surface the important human level decisions that need to be made. In this case, we're talking about media and news. So let's approve this script and let's check out this edit, for example. And of course, give it the instructions. I want a video based on these materials made for TikTok in Portuguese or whatever it
Mhm.
might be, right? I mean, it's pretty much that's you're just kind of ordering a sandwich at this point. So
Mhm.
with that in mind, if you think that we're going to get there, there's some base level elements that you have to reinvent. Like, I don't think the end use case here is that, an AI is going to open up Adobe Premiere or Final Cut Pro or something and start clicking around. And once you get into globalized sort of endpoints for your distribution, you have to change the way you do video editing. And one of the biggest, um, I guess, points to show on that is that when you're trying to make a Hollywood movie, and give me a blockbuster, right? Like, I don't know, Top Gun,
Top
Avengers,
Gun. Yeah, there you go.
right? That movie, maybe I don't know if it was 2 hours long. It was probably 2 hours long in every language where it was released because the
Okay.
format of the
Yeah.
movie was more important than the dialogue.
Right. Right.
The
Sure.
dialogue wasn't great. No shade on the dialogue of Top Gun. Um, but when you're talking about the news or information heavy, the information is more important than the format, right? So
Hmm.
what might be
Right.
a
Yeah.
3-minute news piece in English could be 3.5 minutes in Spanish or vice versa. So timeline-based editing is no longer the thing that you want to be using, right? It doesn't
Makes
work
sense. Yeah.
anymore. So when I say we've been busy, we've been in reinventing every building block possible for the world of the future where AI can control and take all of that, all of the work you want it to take. So now getting back to your question around sort of the ethics of this and who we're providing the service to, we really, as from a B2B business standpoint, can say to our customers, well, here's the toolbox and you may use whichever tool you'd like to use. We can assemble the workflow however you want it assembled, and we're really going to not push the ethics onto the customers, but really it's, you have an established newsroom, your company is decades old, and you've got all this in place, and it isn't about putting anybody out of work. That's not the point here,
Hmm.
right? You have these environments that are just economically challenged.
Right.
And the
Absolutely.
challenge comes really from two different places. Number one, you might be a newspaper, a magazine publisher, linear broadcaster, digital publisher, whatever you might be doing. You have this owned and operated property where you're providing content. Now, the second half of the world is that you have this increasing surface where people are. And social networks alone, you're going to have, Twitter/X and Instagram and TikTok and whatever else, YouTube Shorts, and this increasing landscape of formats. Now, your legacy distribution is probably feeling some pressure. It might be having, in a slow decline, or maybe it's holding steady. And I hope for you it's holding steady. You
I hope so
know,
too.
yeah. But you then also have to now service all of these new areas.
Hmm.
So it's not about saying, "Oh, you've got, this team of 8 people making videos, let's get it down to one." No, it's just empowering this team who's doing fantastic work to now go and make everything else. So, I mentioned we had our first product was called First Cut. The second one, it's called Prism. And
Hmm.
really the point of that Prism is to take a video that you've already created and in the most intelligent way possible, create a version of that video for every other distribution endpoint that you need. And
Hmm.
there's been a lot of products that, will look at that video and say, "Oh, okay, well, here Pete's in the middle of the frame. Let me just cut the frame like this, and now I'm on TikTok," right?
Right. Yeah. Exactly. You got your
And
vertical.
right, and for us, we won't do it that way. We'll look at could be a 3-minute news piece, and we'll just completely explode it apart, right? Where we will pull out and cut every single piece of B-roll and frame and destem the anchor audio and everything we have to do. And we have now a pile of ingredients, and we'll reassemble that pile of ingredients based on the format you need. So we can cut, appropriately for length. We can use existing footage. We can create a new anchor. We can do whatever we want. We can translate it. We can, right? So
Can you translate it to Gen Z lingo for TikTok?
we play with it. I don't know what's cringe or not, right? But
Yeah, exactly.
play with it.
Adjust that meter to taste, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. So the point though is that it's this massive accelerant for a lot of companies that are feeling a little bit of heat economically
Hmm.
and say, we know this is possible. We know this technology exists. Can someone give us a hand getting there? And then we kind of step in and say, well, do you mean like this? And we've got within 2024, 5 different, I don't know if you want to call them pilot projects or betas or whatever, with just, massive enterprises at the moment where we've stepped in and said, hey, here's what you can do if you want. And they said, yeah, we'd like to try that out, please.
So just to be clear, the primary business model at this point is going to be B2B then. You're basically have this platform, this technology, and you want to and maybe not necessarily restrict yourselves to media companies, but whoever has a content operation and is interested in this kind of rethinking of it, and then sort of, I don't know if you characterize it as mass distribution, but I guess multi-channel, omni-channel distribution, as opposed to actually taking on CNN in kind of like a B2C kind of way.
That's correct.
Right. Cool. Awesome. So, and then in that case, it's up to the user, the customer, on how they use this. And I know, just to get in the, I don't want to get too in the weeds on how the product works, but I know you have a certain number of AI avatars that you sort of made by default, I guess. And are those something that are a little more customizable? Because I do want to get into the audience question and the connection they might have with avatars. I think this matters, right? So you obviously have I forget if it was like 5 or so AI avatars in your demo video. and I saw those in the material that I checked out. And can like, is it? I assume you can just sort of customize your own as you sort of use this product, or even put in doppelgangers of your own people, or just use real footage, right?
Yeah, so there's three different options really. One is just you're going to have voice only, and we've done
Mm,
that for customers. And second one is what we refer to as a digital double, where we'll hire a model and put them on a green screen and have a capture process that we think is fairly effective. And that was what, for the most part, was in the episode. We did have one generative anchor, but now
ooh, I guess we'll have to guess which one.
no, 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 it was really obvious. I mean, that was technology a year ago was pretty obvious. But
Right.
however, now we're able to do a purely generative anchor, especially for, like the frame that
Interesting.
we're looking at now. You've got me sort of chest up, right? And we can do that fairly convincingly. I think it's still some ways off from a performance standpoint of I want to make a virtual television show and have this generative person do cartwheels down the
Right.
hall.
Sure.
But for this, I mean, it's pretty close to a solved problem. The movements are natural. The lip sync's great. We're getting there.
Well, and it seems like the ethics of is that it's going to identify itself as an avatar,
Of course, no, we
which seems
all
like a standard that is obvious, but is certainly emerging. I don't know if you saw the story about the Venezuelan
this.
anchors in that were covering elections down there, and that seemed like a pretty good use case for this similar idea. Okay, so but getting back to the avatar sort of nature of these folks. So if a a publisher goes and uses this and has sort of an AI avatar sort of reading the news and getting them into other places, I kind of like wonder about that audience connection. And I certainly realize I appreciate everything you said about sort of the point of this not necessarily putting anyone out of work, and but I do sort of think about it in terms of use case and sort of optimizing for what this should be used for, because you think about like traditional newscasts. Like, I don't personally know Wolf Blitzer, but I do know he's a real guy, and he has some real opinions and thoughts and viewpoints, right? And so when you're sort of have an AI avatar giving you, even if it's just sort of straight news, um, does that limit the use case and even the reach of this kind of idea to a certain extent? And how do you advise your partners on that?
Sure. So I think you have to look at there's two different things to look at here. First is news versus opinion.
Right.
And I don't think you want the opinion of the machine. But I think if you're talking about more factual news, and that's one category. And the second lens to look at this through, it's not really AI avatar versus Wolf Blitzer. It's more AI avatar versus ChatGPT a little bit.
Right,
If
right,
you
right.
want an extremely personalized experience, and it's just you understand that this is, the Pete news feed,
Mhm.
right? You can choose to type with a chatbot and ask your questions and get your answers. Or you can choose to lean back on your couch with your phone or your television and just kind of hear the Pete feed, right? So I don't think we're ever trying to go up and don't worry, Wolf Blitzer, your job is safe. you know, it, it's not really where we're targeting.
Well, what about sort of the flip side of that then? So that's totally makes sense. We're not doing, it doesn't really make a ton of sense to do opinion journalism with this sort of tech. But can you possibly trust it too much in a sense? Because it's sort of like these systems, there's a lot of sort of news about the bias within the systems, and certainly whatever organization that uses it will do the stories that they want to do in these formats. But is there a certain amount of trust that we sort of automatically put in automated systems, and even something that identifies as an AI avatar? Is there a danger of that being misused? How do you think about
I think about it a little bit differently, which is the opposite. People are going to say, "Well, I can't trust it because it's under the banner of this network."
that?
Right? Some people in the country could look at it. I don't care if it's a real person or an AI avatar on an MSNBC or a person or an avatar on a Fox. And you're really
Right.
choosing to trust the banner because the editorial direction in the newsroom, right, has said, "This is what we're gonna talk about." I don't think you're gonna have, an AI avatar on MSNBC spouting Fox News viewpoints. I think they might catch that on the editing room. So
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Um, so as you keep going with this, I mean, it seems like this level of personalization can only sort of increase, right? Like I was actually just writing about this the other day that as you think about uh information, just getting information online and these AI intermediaries, of which Channel One is sort of one of them. But you'd also have things like Perplexity, and I mentioned Google Notebook LM earlier. It just sort of it's hard to sort of not rush to the end of like it's all just one big information blob and everything's just kind of like a polymorph. And depending on what I device I guess I'm using, I would just get an AI to sort of format it however I want. What is the next step from Channel One? Like I say, you've already kind of jumped to the end, but pretty soon it's going to be like there's going to be a next thing. So what does the future hold for this
yeah,
idea?
no, we just keep jumping to the end. So, if you read or see any interviews that I did, I don't know, almost a year ago, I guess, in sort of beginning of the year, we were talking about personalization, and we were talking about personalization based on category the same way we did, I think, 15 minutes ago. Well, we did it, right? We made it. And the truth is, I wasn't that fond of it. So there's something, it was just a great learning experience. It's like, I want to make this. I don't like it. Um, to sit there and watch, and only by going through the process of understanding how it's made and how I feel about looking at it and all that, were we able to actually move a little bit past. So the first sort of unlock was realizing that me and a lot of other folks have no attention span anymore. And I
Hmm.
don't just want to watch this because I mean, I like the topic, but the 3.5 minute piece of this sort of basic piece of news, it's too much for me. So the first realization was there's a difference around the depth of my interest in different topics. And we experimented with that, and our content team created like a news short. And it was like, averaging 25 seconds or something, where you get the idea, right?
Right.
Like this happened, and you get the idea. And it's just for other folks like me, it's mobile. So the bottom half is the anchor, the top half is extra B-roll. I can look, I can just, we need two screens, but we can't just have one screen, right? So
Like my glasses with the screen in them too.
yeah, exactly. So, that was the first thing, is there's some things that I'm more interested in, and there's some things that I'm less interested in. So now I need you to make me multiple versions of everything. So that was interesting. And then, if you have to get to a place of really deep honesty with yourself when you're designing something. And the second thing was there's some news I don't understand it, right? I don't really
Mhm.
know what we're talking about here. So, and there's some things where this is too basic. I want more in depth. And your level of sophistication around a certain topic actually should drive personalization as well. Maybe I
Mm,
need the
yeah.
5th grade version, and not me, but someone else might need a PhD version of it, right? And there's, various degrees of how engaged, or how much of an expert someone is in that subject matter. So, right away, you have that first level of, "This is the piece of news. Do you, as a user, care or not? And if you do, okay, I should show it to you. Now that I've got this piece of news, well, how much do you care? So how long should this really be? And how
Right.
much do you know about it? So how in depth, or what kind of language should I use, or what kind of, is it very technical, or I should dumb it down, or whatever it might be. And you start to see that right there is 9 different versions of every single news story. And
Mhm.
then if you wanna, like you said, we keep jumping to the end of the story, there's really a 10th version, which is the version that Pete wants. Because maybe it's not one
Right.
of these 9. We know so much about you that we can make you the exact right version. And this is really, there's a cost issue here, right? When we spoke to sort of investors, and that's, I don't know, various points in time of our history, they would say, well, this is going to be very expensive to do. And we said, well, actually, not really, because what you have is the AI is being leveraged at the point of content creation, and then traditional media economics of content delivery come into play, right? CDNs are cheap. So if you think about what we're talking about now, you still have that fairly inexpensive content delivery around maybe 9 versions of a story. But then if you have a super user or a premium user, whatever it might be, you can run custom inference on their information diet and give them what they need. So really what it ends up looking like is you have this AI, I don't know, people like the word agent these days, so we'll go with that.
Hmm.
Yeah, like an AI
Yeah.
agent that it's running around the world figuring out what's going on. And then it's going to process, well, what should I go tell you about? And then come and give that to you in the exact right format that you want. And that seems to me to be the end state of where this ends up. So,
And it just does that experience like is there even an app? I mean, is it more like a notification comes in and then it just goes to this
yeah, no, I
experience
mean,
on
look,
whatever device I'm in?
it's
Yeah.
it's 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 about discovery, right? So
Yeah.
it's an app. And now we, while we're describing this, and this is publicly and recorded, we once it's like a concept car, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Doesn't mean
Sure.
we're going to make it. We made it. We
Yeah.
made one. doesn't mean everyone can go buy it. Doesn't mean we can go use it. But for us, we always have to continually push the boundaries of what's possible to know where we should drive, right? What's interesting? What do our customers think about this? What does the public think about this? And of course, we're vigorous around IP protection. So,
Yeah.
patents pending all over the place, right? Um, but it is something that I think is interesting because I think from just our team's perspective, we all like the concept and we would all use it.
Nice. So just projecting out even from the idea of channel one, like what do you see in terms of like 3 to 5 years from now? What percentage of what we're encountering is going to be AI generated in some way, or AI empowered, I guess. I'm not sure. I don't think generated is even the right word here, right? Because it's like it's real news, but it's not produced in sort of traditional ways pre generative tech.
I,
But you know,
I think you're going to have obviously various degrees of AI generated. I think what is lovingly called slop by some people,
yeah, guilty.
and that's going to be there. And what we're hoping to do, if you saw the video, was just say, listen, we're out here trying to be responsible actors. The only thing that
Mhm.
we care about is ethics and quality, right? And we want to work with these other organizations just to help them give them extra horsepower. Um, but in that sense, I mean, I think there's going to be a market for purely human content,
Mhm.
right? That's going to be the premium tier. And I think that's going to go a long way around some of these legacy brands where they have, established reputation for taste and culture. I think that's, if anything, is more valuable. And then there's more just sort of informational, right? Like a live experience in the age of COVID was priceless, right? Like it's just
Mhm.
so the as are not just this, but as just life in general gets a little bit more automated, I think there's something just beautiful about the handwritten letter or the human
Yeah.
curated content and human written content. So I hope that never goes away, says the guy making the AI content,
No,
right?
but I get it. It's kind of like the existence of all this AI generated stuff, whether it's slop or a tier above, is going to increase the value of the human attention. That's the thing you can't really uh replicate. That doesn't scale, right? Our human time and attention.
Yeah, and we don't want to, call anybody out on this, but if you want to be super honest about our existing media landscape, there are some outlets of higher quality and some outlets where they're just pumping out content.
Oh, sure. Yeah, there's human driven slop too. Don't get me wrong. Slop has been around for a long time.
And I think, that's gonna be from the writer's room to, like when social media, sort of really take off, people were saying, "Well, how can I leverage these algorithms
Mhm.
for, just distribution and ad dollars and everything else?"
Yeah,
And content morphed into the right format for a social network. Right? With digital publishing, everything was 500 words and 2 photographs. Is that really the right format for every single story
right.
on the planet? I don't know, maybe, maybe not. So I think this, if anything, gives us a little bit of freedom
Mm.
to shape the distribution around the content, the format of the story, which gives me a little bit of hope that things are, as long as they should be, or, have enough depth as they should be. And really, I think the win here is if we can get more resources in the hands of the journalists that want to do real journalism and not just have to go and cover all of these things. And
Mhm. Yeah.
if we get there, it's actually a giant net positive to every outlet out there, because you can put more of your time and energy toward what you're supposed to be doing and less toward just fulfilling distribution agreements or whatever else you're doing at the moment.
Yeah, exactly. Definitely think that's very attractive to journalists and people who run media companies in terms of like so much bandwidth gets sucked just by sort of reaching people through all these networks, trying to figure it out. Once you do figure that out, how do you then maximize and optimize like the decisions you're making about where to put that human attention, right? So that's sort of almost the other side of the coin in that increases the value of that, but it also puts a little more pressure on that, on making those right decisions, um, for media companies going forward, because that's going to be the thing that sort of drives a lot of what your success and these other formats created through Channel One and other things um, will do. Yeah, I just hope the AI can help us with that too, and I think to a large extent it can, because you get a lot of you get a different relationship with readers when they're interacting with sort of an AI experience and sort of come to you with actual queries. You can sort of optimize around what your audiences
I I think
really want.
the overarching positive message here is that if you work in media, you have an opportunity now to just pause, take a step back, think about what you would love to be doing, and, how do you really add value for your users, and then you can bend this technology to your will. At the moment, it's pretty malleable even from what we've
Yeah,
built, right? And you can actually spend more time doing what you're supposed to be doing and let the technology take care of the rest. So we hope that's the way things shake out over the next year or two.
awesome. Adam, we'll leave it there. Thanks so much. If people want to know more about Channel One, where can they find you?
We've been suspiciously quiet for a very long time, but we're finally popping out a new website. So channel1.ai will actually tell you what we do.
Nice. Yeah, that's true. You have been silent for a while. Why? I think people were expecting you to launch a little earlier this year, but what was the deal there?
We've been busy. Some of this stuff takes a while.
Yeah, I get that. Okay, cool, man. Well, thanks very much, and appreciate the time.
Thanks, Pete.
Thanks for listening to my conversation with Channel One's Adam Mosam. And if you like what you heard, please just take a minute to leave a rating or review for the Media Copilot in your podcast app. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Media Copilot newsletter and check out mediacopilot.ai for our classes on AI for journalists, marketers, and content creators. Be seeing you in the future.